Hello, thank you for taking part in the League of Women Voters of Coos County's highlights on the North Bend School District bond measure that will be on your upcoming November ballot. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization with a mission to encourage the active and informed participation of citizens in government. Voter services are an important part of the League's purpose. The League never supports or opposes any candidate or political party and aims to provide impartial information to voters about candidates' view on issues, about ballot measures, and to stimulate interest and participation in the election. And today we are interviewing North Bend School District Superintendent Kevin Bogatin. Kevin will begin by giving us an overview.
Well, it is my pleasure to be here with the League of Women Voters this year. We are here to talk about Measure 6-192, which is our North Bend School District bond measure that's going to be on this upcoming November ballot. This is not a new process. And so, this is my third year in the district as superintendent. I came as an assistant superintendent in Corvallis. One of our highlights was passing a $200 million bond in Corvallis just as I was exiting the district in Corvallis. And so while I had a lot of work to help build about what is needed in both North Bend and in Corvallis, I didn't get a chance to see those projects get built. And so I am excited to be here to talk to you a little bit today about our bond measure. It's been 20 years in North Bend since the last bond was passed. 20 years ago, a lot of things have changed. Students have changed, safety security needs have changed, and our buildings have aged. The average age of buildings in North Bend is about 53 years old. Our oldest building, which is included in this bond, is Hillcrest Elementary, which is 70 years old. And so this bond measure addresses needs at all four of our district schools. So North Bay Elementary, Hillcrest Elementary, North Bend Middle School, and North Bend High School. Again, this project this isn't coming just in the last few months. This was a project and facility planning over years. Right as I entered the district 3 years ago, the district was completing a long-range facility planning process, which really takes a 10-year look at what are the needs in the district. And then I came in and helped develop a bond development committee that put together the whole package. And so I won't go into details. I'll just leave with the last that these bond measures address three major issues: health and safety, security issues, modernize and update, where we talked about aging buildings, and then really focus on some expanding our hands-on career technical education learning opportunities for our students.
All right, thank you. Our first question then is, are there some educational programs to be enhanced by bond measure improvements that will be especially beneficial to students?
That is an excellent question, and I'm really excited to see some projects. And I'd say mostly where you're going to see this is at our high school level with an emphasis in career technical education. We have an outstanding culinary program. It serves 120, 150 students per year, but they are crammed into a really tiny space. And so this bond would address just expanding our culinary program and allow those programs to expand and really serve kids in a better way. An emerging program that's coming is in health occupation. And really, we see that need developing and growing over the next 10, 20 years. And so this bond would expand and really enhance a health occupational space for kids. That's really talking about sort of science and really some of the more updated spaces to really serve kids. We're kind of in older buildings where lab tables and just spaces and the equipment needed to do that kind of work in 21st century is really not existing. The other part of this includes expansion to our metals and that, welding, hands-on, those programs, again, that's a space that hasn't been touched. Outside of some updated equipment over the last 10, 20 years, the space itself hasn't been touched since the school was built. So those are some places of just it addresses some safety issues, ventilation, but also really enhances the opportunity for kids. And lastly, at the high school level is an upgrade to our drama, music, performing arts space. We don't really have a space where our award-winning band can perform. If you've ever been to a play at North Bend High School, you're kind of sitting on the ground and looking up. And so this bond really revamps that space into some very flexible, mobile kind of auditorium. So we can still use that space to serve kids during lunchtime, but also in the evening, it can be transformed into a drama space, or the band can perform there, or a choir can perform there with about 350 guests. So those are some just examples of program enhancements that we see in this bond.
All right, thank you. The next question is one you've already addressed, but if add anything you'd like to. Will the bond measure enable expansion of science programs? And if so, how will expanded programs benefit students?
Yeah, so I've talked a little bit about that, but I also, one of the things I didn't talk about is just our general science classes in science in both middle school and high school. These are spaces, and we've just recently did a tour and seeing the needs of kids cramped around the sort of the outsides of the building or outsides of the classroom. And really we wanted, groups of kids to be able to work together. We need to upgrade access to gas and water and those things. Again, those systems are just aged. We have had to shut down sort of the gas access to our high school just because there were some concerns around that being safe for our teachers to use. I think we've gotten it working, but again, those are like to really go in and fix the long-term issues. It's some of those expansions and redoing the work that has to be done. I said I really touched on the health occupation, and I'd say that's probably one of those on the science side that I'm probably most excited about. Just because that's, again, an emerging field, an emerging area. I was just in the school the other day, and they have purchased a mechanical arm, and the mechanical arm actually lets blood flow into the arm, and then kids can actually take blood, and they're learning phlebotomy in a science class. And it's those kinds of enhancements. And again, the space is a part of that around how can you have that in an emerging space where all kids can access. Again, that's where our spaces kind of fall short. We have some really cool equipment, but again, kind of this bond really addresses the overall safety and modernizing some of these spaces so that we can really continue to grow those programs.
All right. What impact will the bond measure have on provision of general vocational programs? How will the changes benefit students there?
Yeah, that's really been our highlight so far in this conversation today, because I think that is the area that we've seen the greatest need. And so we've talked a little bit about culinary, we've talked about health occupation, we've talked about our science medals and those kinds of programs. And so again, that is, how do we expand that a little bit into middle school? So there is an opportunity to enhance a program where that hands-on learning, where kids have those early opportunities and early experiences. At our middle school level, we don't really provide an in-depth woodworking or metals, but we start to introduce them to culinary and have those initial opportunities so they can see what's this look like out in the field. So we'll take field trips and go out and see live action metalworking, and then they get to come back to the school and do some of that work. So again, we have in this bond upgraded into those spaces where that's a part of that focus and emphasis. Yeah, so I'm excited about that work.
All right. Will the bond measure include improvements to spaces for school nurses? And how will the updates improve health services provided to students by the nurses?
Yes, our need for really good quality nursing, just health space has really been emphasized in the last 2 years amidst this pandemic. We have observed where we really don't have the space to isolate a sick student. And that really hasn't, I mean, that didn't exist prior to the pandemic. It has just been exacerbated, and a much more, we've created some rules from the state that says you need to have those spaces available for kids. And so yes, as bond addresses, it really revamps our entire front offices. We'll talk probably a little bit about safety and security, but just on the health side, it provides an improved health space for our nurses. At 3 of our buildings, we really did more recently some upgrades at our middle school. So I'm not sure that that's a space that needs to be addressed in this bond, but 3 of our 4 schools will definitely have a pretty significant revamping of our health space. Just this year, I think our high school space has moved now twice in the last 2 years. So they took over a classroom this year, really just came online just days before the school year started. They currently still don't have a sink available to them. So we have a temporary sink in there that we brought in. But those are like our high school spaces around where do you place that? And there's just a lot of needs to sort of revamp, redo the space where it's really easily accessible for kids. And so again, we kind of do the best we can with spaces at this particular time. The bond really takes a more comprehensive look at what are the needs and how do we best make this functional long term. But yeah, so I would say our nurses' health spaces definitely get a huge upgrade in this bond.
All right. Will the bond, and this is another one you've touched on already, will the bond measure include renovations or upgrades in performing arts spaces, including multi-purpose rooms in the middle and high schools?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about the middle school. You know, the middle school space doesn't get quite as much work, but again, the stage drama area have really been untouched probably for 30 years. And so we need to do just some upgrades so that we can have a drama and performing arts space that really starts to feed into our high school program. And so again, at the middle school, it's sort of a revamp, better quality lighting, again, sound quality, just some of those basic needs that are needing to be done in that space. When you move to the high school, it's a much more significant upgrade. The project plan at this particular point is to basically demolish the current stage as it exists, bring it down to ground level, and then bring in or purchase expandable seating so that, again, when you watch a performance that you're seating and kind of being able to look down like a really traditional theater experience. And so that kind of flexible moving of seating and then kind of really enhancing the sound quality, lighting quality, all those different experiences. The space behind for performing arts also gets remodeled. The old building still has sort of the staggered classroom to serve our band and choir that has moved to I think 30 years ago, moved to another part of the building. So those spaces still exist, but are sort of unusable for the general kind of classrooms. So again, this bond takes a look at those spaces and starts to really redo the backside of a theater where you can have dressing rooms, storage space, those kinds of things are addressed in this bond. We have some sketches of what this might look like. And again, we haven't really gotten into the details of what exactly, but we've kind of started to go, is this possible? And they put together some sketches that, again, would seat about 350 people with enhanced lighting, sound, a much different experience for our citizens to come see.
Thank you. Will the bond measure include improvements to virtual learning classrooms?
That is an interesting question. I'm not sure, I kind of look at virtual learning classrooms is where, that technology where the teacher is having to do some things with technology. This is a district that has invested in some technology over the last 10 years. And again, I think there is still some need. If we are going to do long-term distance learning, virtual learning, we definitely need to be able to do some things for teachers to have the right equipment, to be able to engage in an active way so that it's not just a sit and get, a teacher doing a lecture. I think today's expectations, even when we talk about virtual, are that you're able to see some things, or that we're able to take a camera and move, or I'm able to take a screenshot and quickly show you this other thing that we have work going on my table. Those kind of equipment needs don't necessarily exist in all of our spaces. And I think this bond would address some of that. Again, partly, if the bond gets passed, we have a number of years to sort of before we really get into spending some of those resources and we really continue to analyze the needs. If distance learning, virtual learning continues to be a growing, emerging need, then it's something that we'll probably, again, be able to access. One of the things I'm excited about, we haven't really talked about the finances side of this, but in addition to the bond, the district applied for additional grant dollars through the state, and we were awarded $4 million. If this bond passes, the state would provide $4 million of matching funds. We really haven't developed a clear, comprehensive plan for those dollars, partly because of such the uncertainty in just building anything today. So part of that will be to offset some increasing building costs, but some of it will be to address some other needs that might emerge over the next couple of years.
All right, what communication systems upgrades are planned for district schools?
Yes, much needed communication systems. We really rely heavily on just, the old intercom kind of systems are needed in buildings like our schools today. If we're talking about safety, security, and that's probably the number one thing. I mean, we need to have the bell system. So, and we're all used to at the middle school and high school, maybe a bell or something. And those systems, again, will be upgraded. But more importantly is the intercom piece. When we start to talk about just addressing safety or just giving some quick directions around, hey, we want you to get behind a locked door, to be able to hear that in any space in the building. We want that to happen really timely. So again, almost all of our buildings have systems that were put in about the time these buildings were built or somewhere in the middle. And so they have significant needs. And so there's communication systems that are included in this bond at all 4 of our buildings. Again, a much needed system that needs to be an upgrade.
All right, you've already addressed my next question. In what ways will the bond measure upgrade security and access systems, and how will those changes enhance school safety measures?
So we've talked a couple things around safety. There's a couple things that I haven't really talked about. So one is just how do you lock doors quickly? So again, that's sort of an expectation that we have, I think, as we move into this day and age. And right now, in a lot of our buildings, you have to go take your key, go out into the hallway, lock the door, and then you can close it. We have kind of come up with a little temporary, there's a little flap that we put on the door so it's locked and they can pull that off, but those things disappear. So we would basically redo the locking system on every door in the district. So you could easily, from the inside of your classroom, just quickly turn a knob, lock the door. As soon as you push the handle, the door unlocks and you can get out. If you kind of think of a hotel room, right? It's like if you lock the door, it'll open when you click the handle. So that kind of concept. So the other thing we have included in this bond is upgrading just access into buildings. We know in a district that's been around for a long time, like North Bend, and keys, we hand out keys to a lot of people, to coaches, to volunteers, to a lot of people to access gyms and after school activities. We're not great at probably collecting those and overseeing. And so this bond would basically redo those kind of outdoor access into our buildings, provide electronic access. So you'd have a card key, you swipe a key card, we see who's accessing the building, what time are you accessing the building. It shuts off our alarm. And the same thing when you leave and you access and swipe your card, we know when you left, we see that the alarm was activated. Again, and it removes the need to have keys in the hands of people. Again, so we'll have to rekey all these doors, but again, a huge increase in safety for our kids. And then the last thing that's included, and I talked a little bit about communications that are related to safety, but if you go to our buildings right now, you pretty much can walk in the front door and you're in the hallway, you can take a right or left, and you are basically in a classroom in seconds. around today's safety, what we want to do is put some time barriers, right? Some space barriers for people coming into the building that shouldn't belong there. And so part of that is we call it a safety vestibule. Like if you walk into our office, we want it to be very warm and welcoming for our parents and kids, but we also don't want you to have just easy access down to your kid's classroom. Or again, not your child's. We're not really talking about parents. We're probably talking about someone that is coming in off the street that shouldn't necessarily be there, or is looking to do some harm at some place. And so we want to stop you right there. So you're in the office, and then the other doors are locked, and we allow you access into the rest of the building. So again, this bond would address that in all of our spaces. So we create these safety vestibules. It goes along with the remodeling sort of the front end of our buildings that would address safety, security, but would also address that those nursing spaces and just kind of revamping that office space.
All right, the next question is multiple parts. What sorts of upgrades are included in the bond measure to heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems in the schools, and also to electrical and plumbing systems? And how will these changes improve the educational experience for students and staff? How will the changes improve systems efficiency and provide cost savings to the district?
Yeah, these are the kinds of things in bonds that get done and then nobody sees, right? It's behind the walls, and it is the hidden systems of our aging buildings. There's immense needs in all of those areas that you just mentioned. And it almost doesn't matter which system you want to look at. They are 50 and 60 years old. Our electrical system is pretty much maxed out as we start to see more technology, computers, projectors, televisions, things that use more power, electronic locks. Everything is becoming electric in some ways and different levels of power. And so us having our systems upgraded to make sure that we're addressing all of those needs is a huge part of this bond. HVAC, we kind of talked about why is that important. There's probably nothing more important than being safe, warm, and dry, right? That's a sort of starting place for our kids and for our teachers around, is the roof leaking? So this addresses some of those kinds of systems, but also on the HVAC side, we've seen more and more where just fresh air movement, air quality is something that is important. It's important during a health pandemic. It's important when there's wildfires. And it's even important in an area where the temperature in North Bend, again, is fairly cool. So in terms of air conditioning, that's not really as much of a concern for us, even though we are probably going to look at it in certain spaces. And I think that's, as technology has gotten better, we're able to be a little bit more nuanced in how we look and approach some of these problems. We have some of our buildings or some of the spaces that have, a south-facing windows. And again, anyone that lives in a house that has that, in the afternoon, those spaces will heat up. And again, we have these huge windows. And so the temperature on that side of the building will be 20 degrees hotter than it is on the other side. When the temperature outside is 55, it'll be 75 or 80 in those spaces. And so can we do some things to address that? And I think we can. Those are things, again, we haven't quite gotten into the details about exactly what those would look like. The last question you talked about was efficiency. And again, that is not how I would describe our current systems. Efficiency is definitely not something to really address efficiency, though. We really have to address some of the underlying issues. And one of those is windows. So this bond, we don't have a count. I think that'll be a kind of a fun project eventually, is like how many windows are we talking about that would get replaced to a double pane, really high energy efficient. We have talked kind of briefly with companies that do this work around the studying of the cost savings. We have been promised that there would be substantial cost savings when you start to upgrade those systems around energy efficiency. And again, once we kind of start to get to look at the scope of this, there'll be a better idea of what the cost and cost recovery. So, hey, the windows cost X. How long will it take for us to recover the cost of that based just on energy savings alone? A large school district, we spend a lot of money on energy. So it's something that it matters. It's something that we want to focus on. It's something that's included in this bond. And again, I think it's one of those things that I think voters will be appreciative of, because while you spend this money on the bond, it does have a long-term savings where then district resources can be used for better things other than just electrical energy costs.
All right. General question, are there restrictions on how bond measure funds may be spent?
There are a lot of restrictions. This cannot be used for people. And so if there's any concern that, hey, we get this bond and they're just gonna add more administrators, they're gonna add more, we can't use any of this money for people. And so that's probably the major restriction. The other restriction is we do what we promise the voters that we're going to do. So that list of bond projects that we have seen, we've submitted to the state and the Secretary of State, and that will be that's included in all of our voter information. There's a whole explanatory system statement that we've had to create. So we have to stay true to those promises that we've made to our voters. So we've done our analysis. There is some additional resources that were in our bond that will allow us to do some projects and do some expansion. But for the most part, these are, again, this is all capital. So they are hands-on things. One thing that maybe people will be surprised is we can include things like furniture. So again, if you're going to build a classroom or you're going to build, upgrade a cafeteria or performing arts center, you can buy the chairs and some of those things that come with it. You can also buy technology. I think it's anything that has a lifespan of at least 1 or 2 years. There's some rules around that, but yeah, so there's quite a few restrictions. One of the things that we're promised to do in this bond is have a bond oversight committee that would meet on a regular basis as we get this bond up and rolling, to oversee these projects, to make sure that we're providing them information, to give us guidance. Inevitably, we're going to run into some issues, right? If you've never done construction, you think it's going to be a certain way, and then all of a sudden we start doing something, and I'm like, okay, we thought we were going to be able to do this plan, but we've removed this ceiling, and now we're going to need to do X, and it's going to cost. It's going to either cost more, most likely. And so sometimes there's these choices around, all right, are we going to do this? Do we wait on this? Do we enhance this the way we said? Do we make modifications? Again, we'll have a committee that will help us with that. Our school board will be helping us with that to really be responsive to voters and to make sure that we're accountable to our voters on this.
All right. Please explain how district updates and upgrades to be funded by the bond measure will provide benefits to the community.
You know, I'm a firm believer, strong public schools make strong communities. So again, I think when we're looking at that connection to business and connection into just the general folks in our community, they want high quality schools. They want to live in districts that have high quality schools. And part of that is having buildings that are functionable, that are warm, safe, and dry, that really start to serve and meet the needs of our 21st century learners. We also see in this bond, we've kind of talked at the beginning a lot about career technical education and opportunities for kids. You know, we see us as a pathway for our workforce. We're excited about opportunities in North Bend, whether it be expansion of a container facility that may move on here in the future, but just even the healthcare needs. Our hospitals and other agencies, every single one of those needs employers right now, or employees right now. And so what can we play, what role can this district play in having really high quality programs, high quality pathways of career technical education that starts to give kids opportunities, internships, and really then long job opportunities. That's what this is about. I think the other part is we all want just experiences, positive experiences for our kids. And whether that's your kids in the band and to be able to perform on campus and in your own school, I think we also want to see, today's kid be able to play outside. We didn't really talk about Hillcrest in this bond as a gym because, again, in a rainy, kind of cooler climate, our gym cafeteria, which is what Hillcrest currently has, is about, a third of the day is unusable because we're serving kids meals. And so again, wanting the kids have more active, hands-on physical education, this bond starts to address some of those issues. The other one is, these buildings are community assets. And they have community access, and we have a lot of community programs and community groups that come in and use our spaces in a wide variety of ways. Again, this continues to have access to that. It allows easier access when we start to talk about card key access and some of those. But again, just even spaces that serve community in different ways. So yeah, I think this is a bond that benefits not only our school district, but it benefits our community as well.
All right. Just two more questions. Are there projected needs that could not be included in this bond measure that that are planned for perhaps a few years down the road to include in some other source of funding?
Yeah, when we did a full analysis, the total cost was like $120 million of needs. This is a bond that is $48.3 million. So there's a lot of things that were left on the table. I'd say one area of need, I have heard North Bend be called a child care desert, which just basically means families with child care needs don't have access and opportunities for their kids to have child care. And we've seen a need really around early education. And so preschool education is one of those things that it's sort of mentioned in our bond, and it's more as we've left it in there, not because there's a huge amount of funding or any funding for it, but if there's an opportunity as we start to revamp spaces, if we could enhance something for preschool education, would be something that we would want to do. I don't really have a really clear visual plan. Our spaces are fairly overcrowded, and we don't really do anything to address that need. We also know that we're kind of flat enrollment at this point. We're not growing, we're not declining, but our spaces are full. And so how do we do some things to address some additional spaces? And again, this bond, I don't think will address that issue. Short term, we got some federal grant funding to do some portable buildings, which are currently being installed to help us just even through this pandemic. How we use those spaces in the future will be something that we'll have to talk about in this bond. But yeah, I think there's a laundry list of other things that I think they kind of would like to do or that would be helpful. I think this bond addresses, and again, our committee looked at a lot of this, addresses the major needs that were found in this district. Again, lots of other things that we'll have to sort of continue to analyze over the next 10 years.
All right. Last question, since you have mentioned the money, can you clarify the projected yearly cost of the bond measure to the average taxpayer in the North Bend district?
Yeah, so this is a bond, a $48.3 million bond, in addition to $4 million of matching funds from the federal government or from the state government. And so we're excited to be granted that already. So if the bond passes, that additional matching fund grant would happen. So the increase of this bond would be a 77-cent increase per $100,000 of assessed value. And so if you go our bond from 20 years ago, I think I saw a tax rate, it was about 88 cents. So we're currently paying about 88 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. This bond would increase that by 77 cents.
All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add that you haven't?
I think I've addressed definitely the significant issues. I think your questions kind of hit all the major topics of this bond.
Well, thank you so much for participating.
It was my pleasure.